Welcome to Becoming Church, the podcast where we discuss how the message and movement of Jesus is not just about becoming Christians, but about becoming the church. I'm your host, Kristin Mockler-Young, and I'm so glad you are joining the conversation. Hey guys, welcome back to Becoming Church. I have a special episode for the creatives today. I've got Paul Mignard, also maybe more commonly recognized as Sketchy Sermons. Welcome, Paul.
Yay, thanks for having me.
Yay, I love that you did the visual sign language applause.
Is that really the sign language for applause?
It really is.
Okay, I'm gonna have
Look,
to really start using
already.
that intentionally every time now.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm really excited to have you on because I look at you as somebody in the faith space in a very different way, but I don't know if you would consider yourself to be in the faith space or if you just consider yourself a creative or what. Why don't you let us know a little bit about you?
Yeah, no, I would say I stumbled into the faith space. Like I opened the door, I was like, what are you guys doing in here? And I walked right through it and there I am. So no. So I draw. So for those who don't know, I run a art social media account called Sketchy Sermons where I draw interesting people saying interesting things, usually Christians, but sometimes I veer off that path. But generally in that faith space for sure.
Yeah. So what is your church background or history or in the faith realm?
So I did not grow up in the church.
Okay.
I first came to know Jesus in high school. I went to and was baptized in a Church of Christ, which if you're not familiar is kind of an intense Christian church. I had left the faith for a little while, then came back and have been, pretty faithful since then. Like everybody else, I've gone through periods of ups and downs, but really ignited my faith and my learning journey when I started drawing pictures and sketching sermon notes.
Awesome. So are you an artist by trade? Is
not
this
at all.
Your day job? No,
not at all. I write software during the day. So most of the time I'm looking at code and solving problems and doing that kind of stuff. So no, I've always been a doodler. I didn't go to art school or anything like that, but I've always, I'm usually the guy that gets handed the pen to go up to the whiteboard to draw or do whatever. But no, I started to take it a little more seriously once I started posting on social media. And once people started commenting and coming back. So it's been a slow progress for sure. But no, this is totally side. I call
hobby.
Sketchy Sermons my 5 to 7 thing. I get up really early in the morning, so I'm married and I have 2 boys and they do travel ball. And like I said, I've got a job during the day. So it's pretty busy during the day. So I do this stuff in the morning before anybody else gets up.
That's awesome. Did you just stumble upon this one day? How did you decide to start the account?
Well, the way I started was at church. I started sketching or making sketch notes of sermons, right? So I used to be one of those people that would try to take notes, but it never kind of worked. I tend to be a little more visual and enjoy the drawing process a little more. And I stumbled on this version of note taking called sketch notes, where you kind of integrate drawing with note taking, and it really kind of focuses on just getting the big ideas and exploring that drawing side a little bit. So admittedly, I kind of amped up. I turned the dial up on the art part of that quite a bit. Probably more than what's recommended. But through that, I started posting those on social media. And early on, I got some advice that a full sermon sketch note was almost too much. It's way too much information because I was capturing the full sermon notes. If there was an 8-point sermon, I was capturing every note. If they were talking David and Goliath, I was drawing David, I was drawing Goliath. It was just way too much. So from there, I kind of whittled it down to single people with one quote, not single people, not married, just one person generally with one quote. Although sometimes I incorporate more, but generally I'm trying to focus on one idea at a time now.
That is so cool. Okay. I need to understand better about sketching actually I am a creative person. I want to be an artistic person, but I am also fighting perfectionism and maybe a little bit of a lack of ability. So I can't actually envision, like, by the time the sermon is over, have you drawn it out? Like, are you that fast, or would you have to take it home and then like finish it?
It depends. Yeah, nowadays I'm that fast, mostly because I've practiced it a lot now.
Sure.
So this is,
Yeah.
I really started doing this maybe like 2015,
Okay.
2016. And if you look at any of those, I mean, they're awful. It's like random sketches of octopus and,
Yeah.
blocks mixed in with sermon notes, kind of, just almost like stream of conscious type art.
Yeah.
So it depends. I do two different types now. Sometimes I'll bring a paper notebook in and draw with like brush pens and all that stuff. And
Okay.
generally, yeah, by the
Wow.
time the sermon's over, I've got a full thing.
That's
But
amazing.
sometimes I'll, start kind of like a digital version and then clean it up later,
Okay.
depending on it depends. Usually if there's a person in it, those take me a lot longer.
Okay.
I'm not really good on the fly of getting likenesses down, and
Yeah.
so I have to work on that part a little bit more. But if I'm drawing a cartoon person, like, yes,
Oh, sure.
done
Which is
during the
what mine would
service.
be. I would
Right,
mine I would
right,
have like Jesus, like stick person, and then if Mary's there, then the two legs become a triangle and it's a dress, and that's how you know it's a girl. Like that's the
right.
extent of my artistic talent. I taught kindergarten for a long time, and so that paid off well for me.
Oh, there you go. There you
Very
go.
simple likenesses.
Nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so now that you're doing sketchy sermons and the account, how do you choose who or what to draw? I know you said interesting people who say interesting things. But are you like constantly taking in content and media, looking for things, or do you just kind of wait for things to fall in your lap?
Yeah, so it really started like I said, kind of that 2016, 2015 timeframe where I started drawing, but it wasn't until COVID when all of a sudden, like, every church service out there was all of a sudden online, where I had
Yeah,
this availability of content.
that makes
So
sense.
whereas I first started just drawing my own the own services at my own church, I started getting to like, well, maybe I'll do these on Sunday and maybe I'll do one more during the week from some
Okay.
other church in the area. And from that, you just, once you kind of, like I kind of joked earlier, like I walked into the door and there was all these people here, and that's kind of how I feel. It's almost like we're in this great big party and I keep bumping into random people having different conversations, and everything's super interesting. I mean, like even today, it's like you catch something on Twitter that somebody retweeted, and you're like, who are these people? I've never seen them before. You think
Yeah.
like I'm just about to run out of Christians, like I got them all, and then and then you like take a left turn, like, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch more right here saying interesting things. So yeah, it's kind of, I've now gotten in the space where I'm a little more of a collector, right? So when I'm on
Okay.
social media and I see things, it's like, ooh, I snip that. Or
Sure.
if I'm on YouTube or whatever, like I snip those things. Books that are coming out, I'm now getting to the point where people are sending me books, so I like
Are
reading
they?
those. It's starting to get to be a lot. Like I said, this is my
Yeah.
side thing, so there's definitely, I'm
It's
trying to
caught on.
speed
And so
things.
now people are like, hey, draw me or draw this person or yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I do get a lot of recommendations, which helps now, where people will DM me whatever
Awesome.
and be like, hey, have you seen this, or have you seen this person or whatnot? So, I usually feel bad, kind of like you were saying, as the perfectionist, as the, I tend to be more of a people pleaser, and this got me in trouble for a while because I was like, oh yeah, I'll totally draw this person. And then before I knew it, I had this full slate. I was like, I cannot fulfill all these
Yeah.
people that I made promises to. So,
That's
um,
funny.
so yeah, no, I try to be very prayerful about it, because I don't want to just, I never want it to feel like a content strategy, right? Like
Yeah.
I know that's a big thing on social media, like, oh, on this day I post this and this day I
Sure.
post that. So I try to keep it loose, and I try to be in the moment a little bit. There's certain times where certain arguments are happening online. Well, certain times, all the time arguments are happening online, depending
Which
if
one you want to pay attention to?
right, yeah, exactly. So if I want to jump in that or whatnot, but no, I try to keep it an organic process. I try to, try to keep it even with different things. Like I don't, it's really easy to get into space where it's like, well, I only draw people who have, X amount of followers, or
Yeah.
commenting on that. And I try to, dip back and forth between different people and different things. So it's I don't think I answered your question at all. It's kind of like I'm in the river, and all these fish are coming by and I just try to grab whatever I can at any
Yeah.
certain time. So
Well, and like you said, you do it prayerfully. And I think that it gives permission for people to go, hey, your quiet times. Like, I love actually that you do this at 5 o'clock in the morning, because I think it gives people the freedom to not have to sit down first thing in the morning with a Bible and a cup of coffee and like make it look, Instagram worthy,
right.
and like talk to God in any particular way. Because surely as you're going over this idea for 2 hours, you're processing it and you're talking to God and you're letting him move in your spirit through the idea. And I just think that's so cool. And it gives people permission and a freedom to show them, hey, however you talk to God, however you hear from God, like that's fine. If you go for a run and he gives you a download, awesome. God doesn't talk to me when I'm running because I'm breathing too hard. Like I can't hear him.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's, it's funny you say that, because there's definitely been times where, you have that obligation faith. I hate to call it that, but you're like, you have to like push yourself to do just 15 minutes of Bible reading.
Yes.
And it's like kind of like this painful, and fortunately I've gotten to the place where that's become very enjoyable. Almost to the point, because I try not to stay totally in social media, right? Like I try to stay rooted in something real. So it's like you do have to have a healthy Bible reading practice. You do have to read other stuff than just whatever the hot takes are on Twitter. But yeah, just getting out of that obligation feeling to more the enjoyment part. Because I've been there, the whole like, well, let me just get through Leviticus because there's all this like name reading and stuff. But I don't know. It's interesting when you come to the point. I hate to say it when it's like when it could be content, but there's so many things where you read in there where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. This is crazy. And it's almost weird to me that we've gotten to the place sometimes where the wonder of these biblical stories, you just kind of wash over, right? Like, Moses spoke through God through the burning bush. We all know the story. And it's like,
right. And we're
kind of pass over the wonder of it.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder, like, did something happen when Jesus came and like all this weird like stuff? Maybe everybody was just used to weird stuff happening before, like, Leviathans and Nephilim and Ezekiel type angels and all this weird stuff. It was just like totally normal. And then Jesus came and it was like, all right, we're done with all that. And we've all forgotten it because there's some crazy stuff in there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I actually, no, it's good. I love reading in different translations when I do sit down and read the Bible, because for that very reason, where I grew up in the church, like I've been a Christian my whole life. I've heard the Bible stories, all of them 500 times, but it was always in the NIV version. And so when I started reading in the Message or, the Passion Translation, all of a sudden the wonder came back again, because instead of just hearing the same wording of it, same story, but it's somehow a different wording, a different lens, it kind of brings back and reawakens like, wait a minute, that bush was on fire and that's how God talked. Like, was there a voice? What was that like?
Right,
and it gets us thinking and making it alive and like, oh, that's kind of cool again.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. That is so true.
Yeah. And I think there's something to obedience, like you were saying, of just showing up and doing it. But I think it's important to know too, that obedience is not necessarily descriptive or prescriptive, whichever one it is. Like, it doesn't have to be the same for everybody,
Right.
Like, do the Bible. If you listen to it audibly, if you read it, if you draw it, like whatever it is, God's okay with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. And that's the thing, I always say, I mean, this is what works for me. Right. So everybody's life is totally different. And I wouldn't recommend to everybody like, oh, just totally get up at 5 a.m. and do 2 hours of some spiritual practice. And then, it doesn't work that way. So it's, I feel like God has shown me this path, like, hey, this is probably the way you should go. And it's worked out well. So I'm very thankful that we've come together in this moment to do that together, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, and I would say even kudos to you for stepping out into, I had not seen anyone doing anything like Sketchy Sermons before. And so I think it's cool that you were stepping out and like, all right, God, not only am I going to take this cool and creative perspective that you've given me, this way of thinking about things, but now I'm going to put it out there so that other people can learn from it too, not knowing, what, if anything, was going to come of it. And
Yeah.
now all kinds of people love it.
Yeah, for sure. It's been strange in that sense, because I never did it as like a business or a content
Right.
strategy, or kind of like I was saying, there was never a purposeful like, oh, I need to get to this many followers. And there's definitely times where it's like, oh my gosh, all these people are here. I don't know.
Right.
Not quite sure what to do yet with all this.
Yeah.
So, but it's been a blessing for sure. Because I mean, it's definitely helped me learn new perspectives. That's one thing with social media for sure, is just the constant learning, the
Yeah.
different things going on and whatnot. So no, it's been great. I couldn't have imagined what it was going to be like a couple years ago when I started. And I know it's weird to think what it is now is not what it's going to be a couple of years from now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like I said, it's definitely like I'm in the river and I'm along for this ride. I'm not sure where it's going, but we'll
Yeah.
see.
You're going.
Right. Yeah.
You're going. Well, I would say one of the things too that I love about your account is I notice I'm a pastor at a people like to say diverse church, multi-ethnic church. And so when I look into the world, I intentionally look for diversity, or I at least see it. Like it's something that always stands out to me, either a diverse space or where there's a lack of diversity. And so I love that when I look at your account, it is diverse. Like you have all kinds of people represented there. Is that something that is so part of your world that it just kind of automatically happened? Or is that something that you intentionally chose to do?
No, that one's actually intentional. It's funny because I grew up in Las Vegas, right?
Okay.
Which is a pretty diverse city. My dad was in the military, so that was a pretty diverse element. When I graduated high school, I joined the military, which was pretty diverse, so I
Okay.
was in these situations where a lot of different people were kind of put together against their will, or shouldn't say it like that, but a
Yeah.
lot of different people were together in one
Sure.
place. And so after that, when I moved to Central Virginia, I found that it was really easy to kind of get in your own space, right?
Mhm.
Like I'm just going to be around people that are like me. And I found in doing the account, I wanted to make sure I was hearing more than just people that were like me.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, and I try to be careful with this. I don't ever want to, I'm going to say this is going to sound awful, but I never want to just decorate my account with other people, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to make sure I'm hearing what people who aren't like me are saying and have the account be an outpouring of that.
Yeah. And I
So
don't think
especially,
that sounds awful. I think that's
okay.
beautiful. I do. I think it's really beautiful and special that you want to represent. We hear the voice of God best, I think, when we listen to all of the different voices of God, all of the different, you know, um, inflections or representations. That's how we get the bigger picture of him. So I think it's lovely.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. And I was down for more of that. I actually did a post last year where I kind of audited, like, well, let's see what things look like on the account. And I found that, obviously white males were mostly what I drew,
Yeah.
which is fine. But I found a distinct discrepancy in African American women. Like I'd barely drawn any, so it was
Okay.
one of those cases, not where I was like, well, I need to draw more pictures. Like, well, let me listen to more voices of African American women. Let
Yes.
me see what's going on here. And it's good. I mean, I think having a diversity of people, very much like you said, hearing things that they're going through, hearing things that they struggle with, hearing how their churches run and how they do things, it's really beneficial. And it because it is so easy to get in your own
It is.
little tiny tribe. And so yeah, I found it immensely beneficial to just hear what more people are saying, and the problems that people are encountering, things that I would never encounter, that other
Right.
people deal with for sure.
Well, and that's the key. You said choosing to listen to other voices. And I think that comes through authentically in your feed and maybe that's why it doesn't look like you're kind of decorating it with people, is you can just tell, like there's an undertone of, you're not just looking for a male, a female, a black, a white, a Hispanic, a brown, or whatever. but you can tell that you're intentional about listening to the diverse voices. And that's the difference. I think you can tell when people are just kind of grabbing for, I need to have this like token person
Right.
versus I really am listening to these stories to better understand people that have different lived experiences than me.
Yes.
You
Yeah. Well,
know?
I'm glad that comes through, because it's really, it's like I don't ever want to do it to, I don't want to just placate anybody or just,
Yeah,
like I said, I think it would be a worse insult to highlight people of color in a way that would like lift me up, like, look at all these people I've
exactly.
featured, and I think that
Yeah.
would be kind of gross and
Yeah.
not really worth anybody's time. So I
Yeah.
try to avoid
Unfortunately, it
that.
happens, but you are not.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for saying
Yeah.
that.
Is there anybody that you would not draw?
So
Or do
I
you
have
think
an
it?
informal rule,
Oh, okay.
no Furtick and no MacArthur. And the reason I say
Okay.
that, the reason there's it kind of goes along. I don't know if you ever watched Smallville on the WB back in the day.
No.
But it was the story of Superman growing up in Smallville, and it was this
Okay.
awful WB teen drama, whatever. But they had
Teeny
a
bopper
rule,
shit.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. They had a rule which was no flights and no tights, which meant they weren't ever going to show Superman flying, and they weren't going to show him in the costume.
Oh, how
And
funny.
so I've kind of adopted that same rule, kind of loosely,
Okay.
which is no MacArthur and no Furtick. And the reason is when you think of the spectrum of
Uh-huh.
this of people talking about faith, those are kind of on the two ends. Not that like Furtick's a progressive pastor or anything like that, but people have their opinions of him,
Sure.
and people have their opinions of MacArthur. So if I drew either of them, it almost doesn't matter what they say. Like, just based on who they
Mm,
are, people would go
yeah.
ahead and say something about it. And I think the extremes aren't that interesting. When you've got one extreme on one end that's arguing on Twitter that, Bathsheba sinned too, and we have to bring people the truth with a sword, and but then you have the other side that's like, all truth is relative, and really we're all God. And it's like, well, okay, I don't, I'm just, as a good statistician, I'm going to throw both of those out and
There you
deal with
go.
people that are more in the middle. So I do try to hop on the sides, right? So I try
Yeah.
not to just stick to one side or the other. So it gets me in trouble sometimes. Like, I'll feature somebody who's maybe more on the reform side, or I'll feature somebody who's more on the progressive side. But I've gotten to the point where I don't feel threatened, or I don't get angry to hear things I might not agree with. So I try to
Okay.
hear what both sides are saying in some cases. And I kind of operate on the truth, or the idea that, all truth is God's truth. So I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily like, if you're a person that's on one side and maybe we're not on the same side, you could still be speaking the truth, and I'm going to highlight that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I try to have a diverse group of people, not only like we were talking about, um, uh, ethnicity, but also
Yeah.
in ideology.
Yeah.
So I try to hop around a little bit on that as well. But yeah, no MacArthur, no Furtick,
Okay.
just
Everybody in the
to keep
middle.
things easy. Yes.
No, I love that. Yeah. I actually sometimes listen to, and I learned this from Naeem Fazal, our lead pastor. He would listen to this podcast. There's a guy in particular who's an atheist, and he pretty consistently listened to him. And at first I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you taking in all the time people that are arguing against God? But really, you can learn from the other side, and you can learn from the other perspective. So I love that you're kind of, minus the absolute extremes, like representing different perspectives and different thoughts. I like hearing what other people are saying. Just because I read it on the screen doesn't mean I have to agree with it.
Right.
You
Yep.
know,
Yeah,
I
for
think a lot of
sure.
people get confused by that. They're like, oh, if I listen to this person, it's going to change my viewpoint. Well, it's not necessarily, you know,
Yeah.
but it's just a
Yeah, for
better
sure.
understanding.
Yeah. And I
What do you
found,
hope?
oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I found more and more too, in doing this, when you're listening to the other side, especially with people you don't agree with, things really get difficult, and things that you thought were very binary, very, this is wrong, this is right, is like, oh, well, they got a point. Like, I could
Uh-huh.
see why that is a thing, so there's a certain amount of empathy I've found in listening. You know, there's definitely some people who like, I agree with this just because I agree with this. But when
Right.
you start hearing real life situations and real life people being affected by things, especially in the realm of politics, where, you know, it's a dumpster fire now on social media because it's
Right.
everybody's on the extreme and, you
Yeah.
know, lobbing grenades at each other. But when you actually kind of dig into some of these things, you're like, well, you know, we might not agree, but they got a point, and maybe this discussion is way more nuanced than we ever thought.
Yes. Well, and it also helps you to better understand what you believe and why you believe it. If you don't change your position, if you don't change your own theology or thinking, that's fine. But at least then you know more fully why you understand or hold that stance on something.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
What do you hope people, when they come to your account, right? If, as they're scrolling and something pops up, what do you hope that it does? Like, are you trying to make them think? Are you trying to introduce new voices? Like, what is your hope for people when, if they stumble upon sketchy sermons?
You know, my biggest thing that I've always wanted to do is just encourage people.
Mm,
Um, you know, I don't, and this is, you know, hopefully evident too. I generally, even when I get in arguments, I don't necessarily try to put down another side. I don't try to
yeah,
put down a person. I never draw somebody to make an argument against them. You know,
sure.
so I would always hope that somebody would be encouraged in some way by what I'm posting. There's plenty of people out there that are doing reaction style videos. There are plenty of people that are commenting on everything of the day. So um, yeah, I don't have any bandwidth for that stuff. Not that it's not necessary or interesting or good or whatnot. So
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, but I would hope, you know, when I highlight somebody, that they would be encouraged by it. And really a lot of times I do these for an audience of one. You know, it's like, well, you know, I'm just kind of pointing out to this person like, hey, I see you, this was a really cool thing that you said or that you put out there,
yeah,
and here it is, and hopefully my drawing has a good likeness and you're not offended
yeah.
by how the actual picture came out, which happens every now and then. You know, I don't always hit the mark. So um but yeah, I mean, I try to keep it, you know, even though now I've got a lot of people here. You know, when I first started out, it was like, well, if I could put this out and I get one like or one follow from somebody I don't know, I'd be happy with that. And I
Yeah.
really try to maintain almost that same spirit, you know,
Mhm.
because it kind of, you know, it keeps the mission going, and it keeps me humble in a sense to where I'm not, you know, getting a big head, for sure. So yeah, I guess to wrap it up, to say, yeah, if somebody could read what I wrote or what I've drawn and they're encouraged by it, like, mission accomplished.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I will say, as someone who was shocked one day to find that you had drawn me and something I had said as a speaker, as a pastor, it absolutely made my day. So I can only imagine that when people have the surprise of like, oh my gosh, not only did God hopefully use this message, but now because of your drawing, because of your account, like that message now can get out to so many more people. You know, it's a really cool way for you to see people and to recognize what they're doing. And so you're definitely, at least for the person that you're drawing, I would say encouraging and cheering them on in a sense.
Oh, well, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's different now because I think before, when I had 300 followers and I would draw somebody, it was cool, but it was like, neat, thanks. You know, so it's almost an added benefit now when I can highlight somebody. And I'm trying to do that now with, you know, especially with people with lower follower counts or whatnot. Maybe they just,
Yeah.
you know, they're serving their local church.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be internet celebrities. They're not trying to broadcast to the world. They're trying to work
Right.
with the people in their communities. And I love to take somebody from, you know, that's local here, or I believe you guys are in North Carolina,
Yeah.
or, you know, wherever, and just be like, look, there's these people doing this amazing work for the Lord. Like, check them out, please. You know?
Yeah. It's amazing. We have so many people tearing people down that we need more accounts. We need more perspectives like this of like, hey, let's raise people up. Let's highlight and talk about actually the pastors and churches that are doing it right. They're doing it good things, you know?
Yes. Yeah. And that's been, you know, it's funny because I've gone on this deconstruction series where I've been drawing different people with deconstruction quotes. And that's one of the things where it's like, there are definitely people in churches that have caused problems, but then you look at the number of churches, it's like like some sub 400,000 churches just in America.
My
And it's
gosh.
like they're just quietly going about the business,
Right.
saving lives, feeding the poor, taking care of widows,
Right.
just like without
Yep.
a presence, so to speak. And it's amazing. And it's like, at one point I was like, I had these like small goals. I was like, I'm going to draw a church in every state. And then I was like, how many churches are there? Maybe, thinking there's like thousands. I was like, oh, there's hundreds of thousands. There's no way I couldn't even have had all the time in the world.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. One in every state would be cool though.
Yeah. That's
doable. That's
more
doable.
achievable for sure.
Yeah. So what is either the biggest takeaway or something that has surprised you as the artist since starting the account? Is there anything that you were like, well, I did not expect this when I started?
I did not expect, there's been a lot of really cool people I've been introduced to on this. And I never expected, I keep going back to this river analogy, that I thought I was stepping into a creek, and it's like a full on river of people. Like there are just so many people. Like I was saying, even today, you discover people that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
That have been doing amazing work for years, decades. And you're like, how have I never heard of this person? So it's been wonderful kind of just digging into not only people alive today, but even earlier church history. It's like you never hear, well, I've never sought out, the Desert Fathers or some of this early church ministries that are prolific and written about, but it's kind of like you don't hear about it. So just digging into the rich amount of people that are out there now doing the work, but also through time for the last few thousand years or couple thousand years. So it's, it's one of those things, I know it's 5 to 7 time. I wish I had the whole day. Like I'm just drawing pictures all day. Because there's just so much to dig into for sure. So that part has been really enlightening to me.
That's cool. Yeah. You only know what you know. Like you don't know what else is out there until you start to dig in. But then it's like, once you start to dig in or pull the thread or whatever you want the analogy to be, you realize, oh my goodness, I only know the tiniest little percentage.
Oh yeah.
Of the people and the voices and even all the things that God has done and who he's worked through,
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I don't even know, it's like, it's still unraveling. Who knows how deep this thing goes. I feel like I got the big players down. Like, okay, I kind of know. No, I don't even know that. I ran across somebody the other day and they're like, oh, look at this pastor. He's got like 250,000 followers. He's done all this work for like, 3 decades. Like, I never heard of him. Like,
like you said, there's a zillion churches. There's no way you could know about every single pastor. That's
right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Paul, one last question for you. Since the podcast is called Becoming Church, I want to know how you're seeing people become the church or be the church, and specifically if you're seeing that happen on social media.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I feel like there are a lot of people like me who was once pejoratively described as a parachurch organization,
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a lot of people like me, these just independent content creators where, we didn't seek to do this or we didn't seek to become this. We were just kind of sharing. We were taking this faith that we have, and we're taking this talent we have, and we're kind of smashing them together and seeing what happens. And I just feel like more and more of us that are kind of operating outside of our church are just, becoming bigger and bigger. So that not in the sense of like us that are doing it are becoming bigger and bigger, but like it's just getting wider and wider. The amount of people that are out there just putting stuff out. I mean, the people creating videos, the people creating art, the people creating, music. It's just, it's like expanding. It's wild. I feel like that whole thing used to be contained within the sphere of the church. But the church is doing so much. I don't know how they're expected to do that. So it's like other people are kind of doing it. So I mean, I only see that getting bigger and bigger. I don't know how it's going to work in the course of social media as things change. I don't, it's kind of weird now with TikTok and some of these other platforms coming up. Well, I don't know. TikTok's the platform. I don't know any other platforms coming up, but so who knows what it's going to look like in the next coming years. but yeah, I mean, I would say there's just so many of us now that, it's wild, just like I talk about people, church leaders, pastors, people who are operating within the church. I mean, there's just as many that are operating outside of the church, making content, worshiping, using their talents in ways that nobody's thought about. And that part's pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah.
Non-professionals, amateurs, just coming out of the woodwork, making stuff that hopefully glorifies the Lord.
Yeah. I think that's what it is too. It's people realizing, okay, I don't have to have a massive platform. I don't even have to have massive ability or talent, but I'm just going to lean into my creativity, whatever that is, and figure out how I can utilize that, and I think whether it's drawing or TikTok or whatever it is, whatever the next, platform is, I think as long as people continue to lean in, like really, if you pay attention, it is happening more and more, like you said, and it is, I just see God everywhere. Like I just see God's presence everywhere. And all we have to do is open our eyes to see it. And it is in every ability, every skill, every talent, and
Right.
it doesn't have to be massive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I think, there's only, I usually say, like, it doesn't take long before your social media follower count can actually outgrow your church. I mean, it's insane to think about, because the vast majority of American churches, at least, are under like 300 people.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to get 300 followers on pretty much any social media platform. If you show up and you're contributing work and you're being positive and encouraging people, like, that balloons up real quick. So it's an interesting world for sure, where you can hop online and put stuff out there and grow a sphere of influence pretty quickly.
And I think for a long time, the church, as I'm air quoting, would have said that was backwards, but times they are a changing, and if you think about it, like, you're in church for an hour, maybe an hour and a half on a Sunday. People are on their phones and on social media all the live long day. Like,
oh yeah,
we should be utilizing social media. We should be becoming the church outside of just that hour or 90 minutes,
Yes.
I love it. I love the trend that I guess is blowing up or moving forward. So stay in that river, Paul.
Yes. Will do.
Awesome. Well, people, obviously they can find you at Sketchy Sermons on Instagram. Are you anywhere else if they want to look you up?
I'm on Twitter and Facebook, but Instagram seems to be where most of the people are. Facebook, I get some people talking back. Twitter is kind of weird. I haven't figured it out yet, so I don't know how to interact there, but Instagram seems to be a place. And then my website, sketchysermons.com.
Awesome. And we will link it all up in the show notes. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. Hey, if you've got recommendations, if you have people you want Paul to know, send him a DM. We're not going to make any promises that he draws them, but if it's a good, diverse voice, yes. Yes. And if there's anybody else that you guys would like to hear from on the podcast, go ahead and reach out to us as well. Go ahead. Otherwise, share this with your creative people and make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. We'll see you next time.